Hey Thunkers, this is Simran from Thunkable, and welcome to another video in our series where we learn how to use web APIs. Let's start by talking about what an API actually is. The first thing you need to know is that an API stands for Application Programming Interface, but just call it an API. What an API does is that it connects your app to another data source. Now, the web API is a specific type of API that allows you to get information from the internet. It could be from a public or private data source. A good way to think about this is to imagine yourself getting ready to start studying for an exam that you have. You'll open up your textbook and you'll go through the index to try to find the page that the topic is on that you want to study. Once you found the page number, you can flip to that page and you can start studying for your exam. That's basically what a web API is like. You have a database that's full of information and you can go through that information and pick the parts that you want. So in the description box below, we'll have a link to a website that has a list of many different web APIs that you can use in your apps. And these include data sources like YouTube and the weather and Yelp. So in today's tutorial, we'll be learning how to make a country's app. So what this app does is that when you open it up, you'll type in a country name and you'll get some information back about that country, like the currency that they use, what their native language is, and even an image of their flag. So let's take a look at the demo and see how this app works. The first thing this app does is it asks us to enter a country name. So we'll enter in Canada. And once you click search, you'll get the flag image, you'll get the name of the country, the currency that they use, the native language that they speak, and also a map of where that country is located. All that we're doing in this app is we're connecting the country's database to our app so that way we can receive information about a specific country. The app is relatively easy to make, but there are some specifics that need to be followed very carefully, but don't worry, we're going to go through all of this together. So let's get started. So our app is going to have two screens. On the first screen, you can enter in the name of the country, and on the second screen, information about that country will be displayed. So let's start by adding in a second screen. Now we can start building screen one. The first thing that we want to do is we want to rename this to be Search Country Screen, so we know exactly what the screen does. Now let's start adding in the components that we need. The first thing that we need on the screen is a column. And in that column, we want to add a text input where you can enter the name of the country. And we're also going to need a button in this column so that way we can click it to get the information about the country. So let's rename the column to be the Search Country column. We'll rename the text input to be Country Text. And we'll change the button to be the Search Country button. And let's just change the name of the button to be Search for now. And that's everything for screen one. So let's go over to screen two. And what we'll do is we'll call this the Display Country screen. Again, this is the screen where the information about the country will be displayed. Now we can start adding in the components. So we'll get a column. Inside this column, we're going to add another column, and we'll rename this one to be the Display column. Inside the Display column, we want to add in an image, and this is going to be the image of the flag. So we can rename this to be the Flag image. We're also going to add a label in here, which will be the label that displays the country's name. So we'll call it Country Name Label. And we'll add in a row component here as well. In this row component, we want to add in some things. So we'll add in a label. And this label will be so that we can display some currency that's used in that country. So we'll call this the currency label. We'll add in another label right beside it. And this label is going to display the currency symbol. So we'll call this the currency symbol label. And now outside of the row, we want to add another label, and we'll just call this the native language label because this will be displaying what that native language is of that country. And the last thing that we want to add in is a map component. And this is because we're going to be getting information about the coordinates of that country so that way we can display it in the map. And that's pretty much it for design. But remember, you can customize it however you want, so you can change the colors around, you can add different background images. It's totally up to you. Now there's one more very important component that we need to add, and that is the Web API component. And remember that the Web API component just allows your app to talk to another data source that's on the internet. In our app, the web API is going to be talking to the countries database and getting information about countries. So we'll just rename this to be the country API so we know exactly what it is. So before we start programming this app, we're going to take a look at the country's API documentation, so that way we know what type of information we can get back from them and how we can use it. There will be a link in the description for the country's API documentation page. So this is what the country's API documentation page looks like, and on this page you can find information about what this API is used for, what type of information you can get from them, and how to start requesting that information. So you can see here that when we request information from the country API, we're going to get a response back, which is going to be an array of countries, which will have the following things. It'll have name, it'll have latitude and longitude, it'll have the currency symbol, a flag, and we can use all of these things within our app to display them. Great, so now that we know what the database looks like, we can start programming this app. So let's go to the blocks for that. So we're going to start with the search country screen, and this screen is pretty straightforward. You just want the user to enter in a country name and click that search button. Now we're going to need a way to keep track of what the user entered, and for that we're going to use a variable block. Variables are just placeholders that store some information in them until we need to use it. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll go to the variables drawer and get this initialize app variable name to block, and we'll change the name to be country because we're going to be storing the name of a country in this variable. You can name this variable to be whatever you think that will help you remember what this variable is for. Now we want to program what happens when the search button is clicked. So we'll go to the search country button drawer and get this block when search country button click. And we're going to go over to the variables drawer and get the set app country to, and we're going to go to country text and get from country text. So what these two blocks are doing is that we're taking the name of the country that the user entered and we're putting it into our country variable. We're doing this so that we can use it later on in our app. Now, after the search button is clicked, the next thing that we want to happen is that we want to go to the display country screen. So all we have to do is go to the control drawer and get this navigate to search country screen block. Alright, so we're done programming screen 1, which is the search country screen, and now we can go to display country screen and start programming that. When this screen opens, the first thing that we want to happen is for all the country information to be displayed. So for that, we're going to need a when display country screen opens block. So at this point, we're ready to start programming the web API component. Remember that the web API component just allows your app to talk to another data source. In our case, we're talking to the country's data source. The first thing that we'll do is we'll click on country API and we'll get the from country API set URL to block. So in this text part over here, we want to add in a URL. And a URL is kind of like a street address. It tells you the location of where the information that you want is. So for this, we're going to go back to the documentation and go find the URL. On the documentation page, we're going to scroll down until we find the URL that we need to use in order to get information. So you can see here that this is the URL they want us to use. So all we have to do is copy this part up till pname equals. And the second part is just going to be the name of the country that we want information for. Now this URL is in a very specific format that software engineers use, so we need to copy it and paste it exactly the way it appears. The documentation also tells you what each part of this URL means. So we're going to take a join text block from the text drawer, and in the first text item, we're going to paste in the URL that we got from the website. So the documentation page told us that once we have the URL, we want to follow it up with the name of the country that we want information for. And if you remember, we already stored the name of the country we want information for in our country variable. So all we have to do in the second item here is add in the app country variable. So we'll end part 1 of this video here, and in part 2 of this tutorial, we'll learn how to actually start getting information from the country's database. So head on over to that video to finish making this app.